Jealousy is rarely loud. It is often spoken in whispers, disguised as concern, cloaked in familiarity. It does not shout. It leans in with a smile and says, "You've changed," and there it is, the first wound disguised as a compliment. The implication is subtle. You were better before, smaller, more manageable. You fit in their world then, but now you stretch the walls they built for you, and for that they resent you. They don't want your fall. Not really. What they want is your return. A return to the days when you doubted yourself, when you sought their approval before every step, when your dreams were nothing more than coffee talk. You've changed, they say. And what they mean is, you've grown beyond what I'm comfortable witnessing. The second dagger is even sharper. You think you're better than us. No, you never said that. You never implied it. But your discipline, your choices, your courage, it speaks volumes. People who refuse to evolve feel threatened by those who do. Your light irritates their eyes, not because it blinds them, but because it forces them to see the shadows in their own lives. There is a bitterness to their tone when they offer the phrase, "Don't forget where you came from." It pretends to be ancestral wisdom, a noble reminder, but often it's a leash. It's a way to say, stay here with us, be what we expect, do not dare to rise beyond what we know. The irony is, those who truly care about your roots water you to grow. They don't cut your branches in fear. Then comes the curse in disguise, it's not going to last. They say it over drinks in hushed gossip, as if they are clairvoyants of your collapse. But truthfully, it's a prayer. They hope the universe pulls you down because your success puts pressure on their stagnation. Your elevation reminds them that they stayed seated when they could have stood up too. Ah, but the most cunning phrase of all, "Must be nice." It sounds innocent, a sigh behind a compliment, but it drips with venom. Must be nice. To have what you worked for. Must be nice. To earn the life you sacrificed for. What they don't say is, must be nice. To have made decisions I didn't have the courage to make. The tragedy of jealousy is not in its presence, but in its intimacy. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who once clapped the loudest. Childhood friends, old colleagues, sometimes family, they were never prepared for you to become what you are now. They loved you in your struggle, but now your strength humiliates their excuses. When they can't control your growth, they try to control your perception of it. They tell others you got lucky. They say you changed. They reduce your work to chance, your focus to arrogance. They rewrite your story to soothe their own insecurity. And still, you must not answer with bitterness. Let your life speak. Let your work whisper truth into the silence they created. They may try to drag your name through quiet conversations, but you must not offer your energy to defend it. Why? Because the price of growth is misunderstanding. And those who are committed to their comfort zones will always resent those who dare to climb out of them. Understand this, jealousy is simply a confession of unfulfilled potential, a confession of what they could have done if fear hadn't choked them. Every sarcastic comment, every half-hearted cheer, every backhanded compliment, they're saying, "I wish I had your courage, but I don't, and it hurts." You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to explain your fire to those who only know smoke. They are not your audience. They are your reminder, a reminder of who not to become. A reminder that comfort can be a cage when built by people afraid of the wind. You will outgrow circles. You will lose people who once felt like home. But remember, not every home is safe. Some walls echo with resentment. Some doors creak with judgment. Your duty is not to stay, but to rise. And you owe no apology for the air you now breathe at higher altitudes. Let them talk. Let them say what they always say. You've changed. You think you're better. Don't forget where you came from. It won't last. Must be nice. Let them chant their insecurities into the night. You wake up early. You move in silence. You keep building, becoming, breaking the very mold they tried to keep you in. And one day they'll stop speaking your name, not because they've made peace with your growth, but because you've become a distant memory far beyond the reach of their jealousy, and the silence, it will be the loudest applause you'll ever hear. They say it as if it's a crime, a simple phrase that floats across the room and slashes through your ribs like a whisper soaked in judgment. You've changed, not a question, not a compliment, a verdict. Delivered by someone who once claimed to know you, what they truly mean is, you've changed in ways I didn't predict, you've stepped outside the script I wrote for you, they built a version of you that suited their comfort, and now that you've edited the story, they can no longer follow the plot. People don't mourn your evolution, they mourn the ease with which they once controlled your direction. They miss the days when your choices aligned with their expectations, when your voice harmonized with their silence. Jealousy wears many masks, but this is its favorite. You've changed. It lets them feign concern while feeding on their disappointment. It gives them permission to play the victim, while you quietly become the author of your life. The tragedy is, they don't want to understand your journey. They want to anchor you in the past, keep you within arm's reach of their own insecurity. You were easier to love when you were unsure, when you asked for advice you didn't need. They confuse transformation with betrayal. They believe loyalty is staying the same, even if it means drowning in a life you've outgrown. They would rather you be relatable than radiant, smaller than sovereign. If you stay broken, they feel noble offering support. But when you begin to heal, when your laughter gets louder, your steps more assured, they wonder if they were ever the hero in your story, or just a spectator hoping you'd never figure it out. You see, people are not afraid of who you are becoming. They are terrified of what your growth says about their stagnation. It's not you who changed. It's their illusion of you that couldn't withstand your truth. They don't miss you. They miss how you made them feel. Your former self comforted their limitations. Your present self challenges them, and challenge to the envious always feels like an attack. So they say it again, this time slower, as if the weight of it might drag you back down. You've changed, hoping you'll second, guess the very strength it took to break free, hoping you'll shrink again so they can be tall by comparison. But what they forget is that change is not rebellion, it is evolution. It is the natural shedding of layers that once kept you warm, but now only keep you heavy. You were not born to stay still. Trees grow, rivers move, you must too. They call your boundaries cold, they label your ambition prideful. They confuse your peace for arrogance, but these are simply new dimensions of your identity that no longer require their validation to survive. If you must apologize for anything, let it be for staying small for too long. Let it be for watering dead friendships out of guilt, but never apologize for changing. That is the most human, most sacred act of all. You've changed is not an accusation, it is a confession that they have not. A confession that they see you now, standing in a light they never thought you'd reach. So let them whisper, let them grieve the version of you that stayed behind. You didn't change to impress anyone. You changed because survival demanded it, because the cocoon was killing you faster than the unknown ever could. There's a peculiar bitterness in those words. You think you're better than us, a phrase heavy with guilt, not yours, but theirs. They throw it like a net, designed to pull you back into a place you fought hard to leave. It's a statement soaked in defensiveness. It carries no evidence, only assumptions. It seeks to punish not your actions, but your ascent. The higher you climb, the smaller their excuses become, and they hate the way your choices reflect on their own inaction. You never said you were better. You just stopped playing small. You chose to grow, to stretch, to rise. And suddenly, your evolution is seen as condemnation. Not because you judge them, but because your very existence is a mirror. People don't want to be left behind, but they don't want to move forward either. So when someone breaks from the pack, when someone dares to challenge mediocrity, guilt becomes their weapon of choice. You think you're better than us is never really about you. It's about them realizing that comfort has a cost, and they paid for it with time, with talent, with truth. And now you've made different investments, and the dividends of discipline expose what they could have done, but didn't. The mind that envies will always seek a narrative that justifies its resentment, so it paints your progress as arrogance, your confidence becomes ego, your silence becomes superiority, but arrogance doesn't walk away to work on itself. Arrogance doesn't say no to parties, yes to routines, no to gossip, yes to growth. It is not arrogance to want more, it is courage, and courage, to the timid, always looks like pride. They misunderstand you because they never imagined you could change. They framed you in a version that suited them, predictable, humble, dependent. Now that you've outgrown the picture, they try to shame the masterpiece you've become. The phrase is a trap, a test. Say nothing, and they call you proud. Defend yourself, and they say you're guilty. It's not a question, it's a sentence, one meant to chain you emotionally to a place you've long since left. You don't think you're better, you think differently. You've chosen to take responsibility for a life they chose to surrender. That isn't superiority, that's accountability. But accountability terrifies the average soul. It's easier for them to point fingers than to face mirrors. Easier to accuse you of arrogance than admit they settled. So they gather in corners, whispering their doubts, hoping if enough of them believe the lie, it becomes truth. But here's the truth. People who truly know their worth never feel threatened by yours. Those who are walking their path never throw stones at those ahead. Only the still ones, the bitter ones, find comfort in questioning your motives. The more you shine, the more shadows you cast. That is not your fault. It is your nature, light exposes. It does not ask permission to illuminate. So let them say what they will. Let them project. Let them poison their own reflections. You are not obligated to dull your light just to soothe their envy. You did not rise to insult them. You rose because staying low was killing you. And if they insist on believing that growth is arrogance, then let them stay among the weeds, whispering to each other about how flowers are too proud for blooming. This phrase arrives not as a reminder, but as an accusation. You forgot where you came from. It's spoken with eyes that do not see, by mouths that do not want to understand. It's a plea wrapped in barbed wire. They mistake movement for abandonment. Because you walked a longer road than they were willing to travel, they assume you left them behind. What they don't see is the weight you carried from those early days, still strapped to your back. You didn't forget where you came from. You simply refused to build a house there. You planted seeds in the soil of your origin, but you did not mistake the seedbed for the final harvest. They say it like your past should have kept you humble, but they don't understand that real humility is not staying poor in spirit. It is rising quietly, gracefully, while remembering every brick that scraped your skin along the way. The insecure mind weaponizes nostalgia. It turns it into a leash. It expects you to wear your pain as proof that you belong. But pain was a passage, not a home. They say you forgot where you came from because they need to believe it. If you remembered, then you'd still be there with them, bitter, small, and dreaming in silence. But your very presence in the world now says otherwise. They want you to shrink back into the mold you broke. Not because it fits you, but because it reassures them that they haven't fallen behind. The minute you refuse, the accusations come. You remember everything, the hunger, the loneliness, the way the walls whispered that no one was coming to save you. And that's why you left, not to forget, but because remembering too deeply would have made you drown. Some people treat your success like betrayal. They believe loyalty means staying stuck. But there is no virtue in dying in the same place you were born. A caged bird that sings is still caged. You came from fire, but you became water, fluid, adaptable, unstoppable, and they resent that transformation. It means you did something with the same ingredients they wasted. The past is not an anchor, it is a compass. It points you to what you survived, not what you owe. You owe no one the sacrifice of your future to prove the authenticity of your past. When they say you forgot, what they mean is, I miss who you were when I could predict you. They miss the version of you that didn't make them uncomfortable, the one who asked for advice instead of giving it. But growth has its own silence. You don't owe them proof that you remember. The scars on your hands, the stories in your voice, they speak for themselves. And still they will mutter, still they will pretend your progress means you've turned your back. But what they'll never admit is that deep down they know they had the same chance and they never took it. So they turn remembrance into a prison, but you turned it into fuel. And that is the difference between you and those who stay behind. Pretending their immobility is a badge of honor. They say it with a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You got lucky, a phrase meant to erase every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every silent battle you endured. It's a soft dagger wrapped in envy, because if it was luck, then they don't have to feel small. If it was chance, they don't have to face the truth, that they too had time and wasted it, that they had talent but traded it for comfort. People say you got lucky when your discipline starts to hum louder than their excuses. It soothes them, it lets them believe success is a lottery ticket, not a lifestyle, not a mindset, not a relentless commitment to rising again and again. They never saw the nights you stared at ceilings, doubting yourself into silence. They never saw the meals you skipped, the friends you lost, the days you wanted to quit but didn't. Luck doesn't explain that. No one calls it luck when you're still unknown. No one mentions luck when you're working 2 jobs and chasing dreams in the dark. But when a light finds you suddenly, you didn't earn it, you were gifted it. That is the myth the bitter cling to. It makes them feel safe. It tells them the world is unfair, not that they are uncommitted. It spares them the shame of not trying hard enough. But let's tell the truth, luck didn't write your plan. Luck didn't pull you out of bed on days your soul wanted to disappear. Luck didn't walk you through failure after failure and still leave your head held high. They confuse outcome with origin. Yes, perhaps the stars aligned once or twice, but what use are stars to a person who refuses to look up? You didn't wait for opportunity, you became it. You didn't wait for a miracle, you built one. And still they call it luck, because if it's anything else, they have to admit they chose comfort over calling. People are allergic to effort they didn't make. They resent the mirror your existence holds up to their wasted years. So they call it luck, hoping to reduce your story to a moment instead of a mountain. You bled for this, quietly. You broke cycles for this, silently. You said no to distraction, to doubt, to decay, repeatedly. That's not luck. That's conviction. But they can't grasp that. They don't know what it means to fall in love with the process. They only see the result. And so they name it something, say, luck, as if success just fell from the sky into your lap. You are not chosen randomly. You chose yourself, over and over. While they waited for permission, you built momentum. While they hoped, you worked. And now your reward arrives. And with it, the jealous tongue says, must be nice. Must be luck. But luck doesn't stay. Luck doesn't build legacies. It is not luck that carried you here. It was the hours no one clapped for, the failures no one saw, the bruises no one believed in, and that doesn't come wrapped in luck. That comes from fire. The statement sounds almost mournful, doesn't it? You're not the same anymore. It echoes like the closing of a door. But the truth is, that door didn't close. It evolved into a wall they can no longer pass through. They say it as if staying the same is noble, as if you were supposed to remain suspended in time, a portrait painted in their memory, unchanged and unchallenging. But change is not betrayal. It is the most human thing we can do. Water becomes steam. Trees lose their leaves. You are not meant to be who you were at 20 or 30 or 40. Life demands transformation. What they really mean is, you've become someone I don't control. Someone who no longer seeks their approval, who no longer bends their truth to fit the room. They liked you better when you needed them, when your insecurity made them feel wise, when your doubt made their advice seem prophetic. But now you stand on your own. Orla, clearer, freer. They remember the version of you that made them feel secure, the version that asked permission, that apologized for existing too loudly. But that person was surviving, not living, and now that you've stepped into your own light, they feel abandoned, not because you left, but because you evolved beyond the dynamic that once served their ego. They say you've changed like it's a curse, but what they refuse to see is that you didn't change into someone. You finally became yourself. Their discomfort isn't with your growth, it's with their own refusal to grow. Your transformation is a reminder that they are standing still, not because they can't move, but because they won't. The new you doesn't explain. The new you doesn't entertain every insult, doesn't dance for their amusement, doesn't beg for a seat at the table. And that terrifies them. You see, change is not always celebrated. Sometimes it's punished, especially when it forces others to reckon with the illusions they've built. You shattered their expectations, and now they call you the stranger. But strangers are simply people who refuse to fit inside someone else's story. You didn't become foreign. You just stopped speaking the language of self-abandonment. They say you're not the same anymore, as if that's a sin. But maybe the real tragedy is staying the same in a world that begs you to evolve. So let them say it. Let them grieve the version of you that made them comfortable. You do not owe anyone your stagnation. Not even those who loved you once. Because becoming who you were meant to be will always cost the relationships that only knew the shadow of your potential. They will always say the same 5 words, and not because they have anything to do with you, but because they have everything to do with themselves. Must be nice, you changed, you forgot, you got lucky, you're not the same anymore. They don't say these things to understand you. They say them to preserve a version of themselves that never had the courage to transform. And it's easier to question your growth than to confront their own stagnation. You must learn to hear these words as echoes of fear, not truths about your path. They are spoken by people who have not tasted the quiet, brutal discipline of building something out of nothing. They have not stayed up at 3 a.m. to chase a dream no one believed in. They have not cried in private, fought through doubt, or stood alone when the world walked away. You have, and so when they speak, let the weight of your journey anchor you in peace. Jealousy never uses its real name. It doesn't arrive in honest conversation or direct confrontation. It sneaks in through sigh, dies, and passive comments. It cloaks itself in concern, in nostalgia, in the illusion of care. But it's never love that makes people speak like that. It's the realization that they can no longer stand where you now walk, and that their refusal to rise has finally cost them their closeness to you. Let them talk. Let them whisper and speculate and invent stories where you're the villain because you outgrew the role they gave you. Let them miss the version of you who stayed small to make them comfortable. You owe no apology for becoming someone they can no longer recognize. You did not change to hurt them. You changed because you refused to die as someone you were never meant to be. What they call luck is the result of sacrifices they never saw. What they call forgetting where you came from is actually choosing not to relive what you survived. And what they call change is the natural consequence of healing, evolving, and wanting more. They only see the fruit. They never planted the seeds, and they certainly never watered them in silence the way you did. There is a moment after all the noise where silence becomes your closest friend, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have nothing left to prove. Your story does not need defense. Your success does not need permission. And your peace does not need to be interrupted just to satisfy the curiosity of those who never showed up when it mattered most. We are not meant to stay unchanged. We are meant to shed layers, to abandon beliefs that no longer serve us, to leave rooms that keep us locked inside ourselves. Growth is not betrayal, it is survival. And if your rising offends someone, it only confirms they expected you to remain beneath them. You didn't owe them stillness, you owed yourself motion. There is a rare kind of loneliness that comes with outgrowing the crowd you once called home. And it's not something many people talk about. They talk about ambition and success. but they don't talk about what it costs the moments when you look around and realize you have no one to celebrate with, because those who should be clapping are busy mumbling behind closed doors. But even then, especially then, you keep moving, not out of spite, not out of arrogance, but because the horizon is calling and the past has already spoken. You're not running from them, you're running toward the life you deserve. And if they cannot run with you, let them walk in circles. Some journeys are meant to be taken alone. They will accuse you of forgetting, but they never ask what you had to remember just to keep going. They'll say you changed, but they never saw the nights you begged not to be the same. They'll say it was luck, but never offer to trade places because deep down they know they wouldn't survive a single chapter of your story. Your transformation is not the enemy. It is the evidence, the proof that people can be reborn, that pain does not have to define you, that history does not have to hold you, that family, friends, environments, none of them have the final say. You have rewritten your role. That alone is power. There is no medal for surviving jealousy. There is no parade for outgrowing those who never wanted more. But there is peace, and that peace will eventually outweigh the loneliness. You'll begin to find others who speak your language, who understand without needing explanation, who are too busy building to gossip, too full of vision to envy. Let the words they say be their burden, not yours. You don't have to carry their insecurities. You don't have to pause your growth to make space for their comfort. You can wish them well and still move forward. You can love from a distance, and you can choose peace over approval every time. You are not the same anymore, and that's the point. You didn't come this far to keep pretending to be someone you no longer are. The very change they criticize is the change that saved